we're solidly committed to this. I have a good legal team. We have the money necessary to do this, and we have the connections. So if the college wants to re-educate me, they're more than welcome to try. But if they think they're going to do it in secret, they've got another think coming.
Welcome to the Lion Legal channel. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe.
The court that we appealed the College of Psychologists' decision to decided that the college it's within the college's purview to stop me from having any political opinions, as far as I can tell. The decision, which I posted on Twitter and will post in the description of this video, starts out by making a case for the fundamental reality of freedom of speech for Canadians in Canada, and then says, but, and that's always a bad start when you're talking about freedom of speech, but apparently the college has the right to decide that I can be re-educated forcibly.
Jordan Peterson has lost his court case in Canada. This is one of the few YouTube channels which has actually read the court decision and is going to take you through it. Importantly, he's also effectively had to pay what serves as a fine. But you'll have to watch until the end before I tell you exactly how much that is. So, I've actually read the court case and I'm going to give you the lawyer's perspective on what took place. So, Jordan Peterson applied to court for what's called judicial review of a decision of the College of Psychologists of Ontario. Now, judicial review is essentially a situation whereby a governmental organization has been unfair in some way and you're applying to court to change that decision. So that is essentially the layman's phrasing for what he was looking for in court. Now, the College of Psychologists of Ontario can mandate that psychologists that are members behave in a particular way. And they tried to mandate, based on complaints that they received, they tried to order Peterson to complete specified continuing education or remedial program regarding his public statements, which could essentially be seen to impinge on his free speech rights.
No excuse for this. So that's what I'm thinking. Now, there's part of me that's thinking, well, look, Peterson, the College of Psychologists is after you. You've taken it to court. Now the judges have decided that you're wrong. Maybe you're wrong.
Now, the Canadian Constitution, the Charter of Rights and Freedom, Section 2B, expresses that Canadians do have the right to free speech, and it states that everyone has the following fundamental freedoms: freedom of thought, belief, opinion, and expression, including freedom of the press and other media communication. Obviously, a plain reading of that would assume that Dr. Peterson does have the right to free speech, even in public statements. However, the court decision said otherwise.
Let's see what I did wrong. I think what I've done on the public communication front is my responsibility as a clinician to tell the truth about what I see. So we'll make it public.
Now, based on statements of Jordan Peterson, which had been either tweeted out or said on the Joe Rogan podcast or in other venues, the College of Psychologists stated that Jordan Peterson's statements were or could be perceived as disgraceful, dishonorable, and unprofessional, and also posed moderate risks of harm to the public. And in addition to that, they felt that balancing his right to free speech did not impinge on actually proposing that he undertook the remedial training. So they stated that even considering the right to free speech that he had under the Constitution, this did not impact or this was proportionally balanced with the conclusion that they came to that he should have mandatory training in order to ensure that he does not make the same type of statements that he made before in the past. Now, specifically, the statements that they are referring to were actually listed in the court judgment, and it stated that the inappropriate statements included a tweet on January 2nd, 2022, in which Dr. Peterson responded to an individual who expressed concern about overpopulation by stating, quote unquote, "you are free to leave at any point." And essentially, the College of Psychologists stated that could be perceived as an invitation to self-deletion. Another comment that he apparently made was when Dr. Peterson, on a January 25th, 2022 appearance on the Joe Rogan Experience, stated that he had a vindictive client whose complaint about him was a quote-unquote pack of lies. And when speaking about air pollution and child deaths, Dr. Peterson said, "It's just poor children. The world has too many people on it anyways." Now, obviously, that statement was sarcasm, but that was not what was interpreted or how it was interpreted in the court judgment. Now, the court goes on to list other statements that he has made, such as stating that Catherine McKinney, an Ottawa city councillor who uses the they-them pronouns, was an appalling, self-righteous, moralizing thing, quote unquote.
Until I learn my lesson, whatever that is, regardless of how much time that takes, by their judgment, or they can take my license away. And so the court says, well, of course you have freedom of speech, Dr. Peterson, but because you're a professional, you're bound by your professional organization. And apparently they're not bound, even though they're a government organization, fundamentally. Apparently they're not bound by that fundamental constitutional axiom. And so that shows you, all you Canadians who are listening, and everyone outside of the country who might be the least bit interested in Canada, that shows you exactly what our bloody Constitution is worth.
Now, in order for the court to overturn the College of Psychologists' conclusion called the decision, which states that mandatory retraining should be applied to Dr. Peterson, there would have to be a standard reached, which would be, number one, that the College of Psychologists failed to conduct an appropriate, proportionately focused balancing of the right to free speech compared to the mandatory retraining that they ordered Dr. Peterson to undergo, and two, the conclusion of the Board of Psychologists or the College of Psychologists failed to meet the standard of justification, transparency, and intelligibility required by the Supreme Court's decision in another case. Ultimately, the court decided that those standards to overturn the underlying decision were not met, and Dr. Peterson would essentially be mandated to have to pay $25,000. And I think that it even underlies the fact that he's so financially successful at this point that he didn't even comment or harp too much about the fact that he had to essentially pay costs, what are called legal costs, in the amount of $25,000. Because imagine if it was an ordinary psychologist who was ordered to pay that, they would have hit the roof. They would not be happy. And essentially, I have a few thoughts about this judgment. Number one, what can a person who is professionally regulated actually say if they are regulated by a professional body, if they're a surgeon, if they're a lawyer, if they're a psychologist, what right to free speech do they have in Canada? And it appears that, at least in this case, as far as the College of Psychologists are concerned, they can completely prescribe and detail what you can and cannot say in a lot of instances. And basically that means that there is no right to free speech. Your right to free speech is based upon the fact that you have a profession, and if you go against that profession, they will be on to you. And if you try to appeal that in court, you will get assigned what is effectively a fine on top of that. Another thing I think about this is that it shows how difficult it is to balance the social media age and to get out there and say what you truly feel. If you're against particular agendas, you can't say it. If you don't agree with political ideology, you can be shut down. No matter what you think about what other people do in their life or where you lie on the political spectrum, if a professional body that is actually that's controlled by the government of the time, and you disagree with that political ideology, what does that mean for you? And that is the true underlying issue in this case. So make sure to show support for the channel by liking, commenting, and subscribing.